Today on the Sandro Forte Success stream, I am joined by English cricket legend Peter Trego. And I'm calling him a legend because I grew up playing alongside Pete, and he was the one I always wanted to be when I grew up. Some would argue I haven't ever quite achieved that, either cricketing prowess or ever grown up. But today we get the opportunity to talk to Pete. He and I go back an awful long way. He is one of these annoyingly perfect individuals who, whatever he turns his hand to, he's really, really good at. His cricket career spans over 20 years with Somerset and latterly Nottinghamshire. He's also a TV pundit and commentator, and he even turned his hand to golf and became professional in the process. So that will give you some idea of the person I'm talking to today. But most importantly, he's a really, really good bloke. And I say that sincerely. As I said, we go back a long time. Somebody that I would consider a good friend. But the reason he's on this success stream today is because he has lots of really amazing stuff to share. So, Pete, welcome to the success stream. You are live. Be careful what you say. But welcome. It's really, really good to see you again, mate.
Yeah, good to see you, Sandro. And a very kind and overwhelming introduction. And I'll throw that back at you because, you know, when I was doing my thing on the cricket field, you know, we'd often play games, and or certainly you're associated with the clubs that I've played for back in Western. A great golfer yourself, and I always, you know, you're a little bit older than me, and you know, also a very good-looking lad as well. You had a silky golf swing. You always drove nice cars as well. So there was jealousy potentially both ways, mate. So maybe that was the spark of the friendship that we've had. We don't see each other a great deal, which is a shame, but you know, we speak from time to time, and it's always a pleasure, mate. So I'm looking forward to this next half hour. I'm not sure where it's going to go, and nor are you, and that excites me. So we're happy.
Peter Trego and Sandro Forte, inaugural members of the Mutual Appreciation Society. So it is great to have you on the show today, Pete, because I think one of the, and I meant this sincerely, you have always been really good at everything you've ever done. Now, before the live stream started today, we had a quick chat and we caught up and we established that you've got ADHD and I've got OCD and you've got a little bit of that as well. But, you know, I did say to you, it's kind of good that you have struggled at one or two things in life, as we all have. And it's kind of nice that you have that authenticity about you, that you admit that not everything comes easy, even though to the outside world, it probably does, because they see you, you know, hitting the ball out of the park on regular occasions and taking people's middle stumps out of the ground, and then just taking like a duck to water when you've got a microphone in your hand. But, you know, academically, it would be fair to say that hasn't been your strongest subject. But I think what I'm interested in starting with is what do you put your success down to? Is it that commonly asked question, is it nature or nurture? Because all I ever saw of you is somebody who just really, really applied themselves, you know. So I'd just be interested in on your take, and maybe in answering the question, a little bit more background on your career, where it all started, you know, the highlights, the lowlights, and anything else in between.
I mean, it's a great and very broad question, and it might take a bit of answering, but I think it's probably a gripe a lot of sports people will have. And a lot of the success I've had in my life from, you know, my friends, peers, supporters, they see the end result all the time. And you'll know this, you know my brother Sam as well. And again, I mean frustration. I mean, you know, what I'm trying to say is supporters see the glitz, the glamour, the sixes, the wickets, the appearances on Sky TV games or whatever it may be. But underneath that sits, in some ways, a lost childhood. You know, so when, you know, certainly in my latter teens, when my friends were, you know, living in Somerset, so close to Stamford as well. You know, when my friends at school were experimenting with the different ranges of Thatcher's cider you could get just down the road, I was in the nets with Sam. We were walking miles down the road to get to the nets at Weston-super-Mare Cricket Club and Uphill Cricket Club, depending on what was available. So I think, and I'm pleased you said that you noticed there was an application to the way I went about my business, because a lot of people have described me as this, really talented guy who can turn his hand at anything. I played non-league football up to a good level. I almost had a dual career for about 10 years when I first started playing. I took up golf and I ended up with a +4 handicap and tried my hand at some professional tournaments. So from the outside, if you just took a little bit of an overview of my achievements in some ways in sport, you'd think, yeah, a guy that's got a lot of talent. But the hours, I mean, even this morning, for instance, I was at Menop Springs Golf Club, practicing my short game, 2 hours on my own. That's what's familiar to me. That's what's brought me the success. And actually, sometimes when other sports people get banded with, wow, how talented you are, there's a little bit of a frustration in there, because actually I think my biggest talent is how I'm able to find those little traits that I have. You describe yourself as having OCD. I definitely have those sort of traits. I'm not saying there's any sort of clear diagnosis, but I think my super strength as a person is when I want to get good at something, and I think the caveat to that is I have to enjoy it and want to get good at it. I'm so driven. The blinkers are on, and I can go down rabbit holes like you would not believe. And that's something that I love doing. But like I said, when people just see, the performances that I've had in the past on the field, what sits underneath that in everything that I've done is an incredible amount of hours of hard work. I sit here now at, in my 44th year on the planet, ankles not in a great space. I spend probably 2 lots of 15 minutes a day stretching, just because I have to. Otherwise, I'm in quite a lot of discomfort. And that's because, me and Sam in particular, it was brilliant having an older brother, which I think was part of the reason why I had so much success, because I always had a mate that I could call on to go and practice and test myself against, because he was 4 years older than me. So I've sacrificed a lot of myself in terms of other things I could have done. Academics is a prime example. I can just remember being at school, just, my French teacher, Mr. Taylor from Wyvern Comprehensive, "Oi, Trego!" And I'm gazing out the window to the games fields where the year below or 2 years below are doing their game sessions, and that's where I wanted to be. And yeah, so I think that's one thing to always keep in mind of whenever you sort of see someone with a perception of success, is don't assume that it's just a natural gift. There's often a lot sits under that, and I'm sure you can attest to that in your own personal career.
Yeah, I think in my own career, the day job, if you like, and I guess perhaps with the speaking side, it's something I'm very passionate about. So I put more hours in, and I'm talking to you today as someone who goes back a long time with you playing cricket. I remember the young Peter Trego stood in the covers as I was bowling at one end, and we batted together. And little did I know that this is a guy, and you probably won't even remember this, Pete, who gave me your bat. It was the bat that you used to, I think, hit one of the biggest sixes in one of the Indian cricket grounds. I can't even remember what it was, but you really, really kindly gave me your bat. You also probably don't remember that to enable me to make a sizable charity donation, you once came in off your full run up, and I was batting, and I wanted the challenge of facing Pete Trego at full tilt, and the ball passed me before I'd even lifted my bat up. I don't even remember seeing it. So I think the point I'm making here is that the things I think we're really passionate about are usually the ones we put the hours in because we're more serious about them. And, my day job and the speaking is something I think I've become quite good at. Whereas by contrast, my cricketing career, my golf career, okay, I played county golf and was fortunate to captain Somerset, but I was never anything like as good as you. And that was because if I'm really honest, I would go week to week, and I'd rely on some natural ability, I guess, but that only gets you so far. And that's why I was probably decidedly bang average at pretty much everything I ever tried outside the day job. So I think you're absolutely right. And I guess the big message for everyone listening today is, you know, you've got to be serious about what it is you want to do, and you've got to be prepared to put in the hours. In terms of how did the commentary stuff come along? Because, you know, you've always been a very articulate, very confident lad, and I can use the word lad because you're 12 years younger than me. But you know, how did that evolve? You know, what do you get from it? I mean, it must be pretty enjoyable, but it's a far cry from the kind of the drilled, regimented, put the 2 hours in, go play a tournament, play a cricket match. This is very much thinking on your feet. Very, very much a different dimension to what you've done before. So how did that all come about? And is that a full-time career possibly?
Well, I think, and I will always speak honestly and frankly. I think I'm probably in this position now where I pick up work to speak, to commentate, to use my mind, if you like, which is something I haven't really done before apart from play sport. And it came from a place of being quite a sociable person. And if I'm perfectly honest, I'd have gone to just about any event that Somerset County Cricket Club put on where the chief executive, Peter Anderson, said, there's a tab open for you, Tregs, and you can have a couple of pints on us. So where you go to the Somerset committee, cheese and wine, all of the senior players said no, and a 18, 19, 20-year-old Pete Trego put his hand up, and I would do the Q&As. Sometimes I would do a after dinner talk. And so just by being social, and I've always had this really, really strong opinion on being a sportsman, that especially in a sport like cricket, where it's so analytical and numbers based and in a lot of ways quite geeky, I've always, brought up as a huge Ian Botham fan, first and foremost. I believed I was an entertainer. That's how I saw myself as a cricketer. You know, whether it's the old dears at, in front of the Colin Atkinson fan, or the guy in the anorak with his scorebook. I was driven by the desire to go, I want someone in this ground to go home to a brother, sister, wife, whatever, and say, you never guess what Tregs did today. That was my drive. And I think that lends very well into building up the confidence to be able to stand in front of 1,000 people, 500 people, however, certainly not more than that as a cricket speaker, but to have the confidence to stand, to articulate, and to tell the stories. And in terms of commentary, and this is the amazing thing about the human mind as we grow up and evolve, and absolutely surprise myself at times. I've got like this little data chip in my head that's got 25 years of anecdotes, stories, watching people bowl, in swing, outswing, leg spin, off spin, you name it. There's nothing really, and I hope I don't sound like a knobhead for saying this, but there's nothing I've really seen in the game, whether it be watching it or experiencing it in person. So, and sometimes as a commentator, you can see it coming. You almost when the ball's in flight and the batsman gets to the top of his backswing, you almost know what's happening. So I think that's a huge advantage. But also, again, drilling down the skills to be a sportsman. Those little minute movements that you're trying to correct to play the perfect cover drive. Something that you're very aware of and you learn. Whereas now, I've got the privilege to co-commentate on Somerset's live stream with Vic Marks, who's been one of the best broadcasters, sports broadcasters in terms of cricket, I think that's ever been. He's got a beautiful silky voice. He played in a magnificent era. He talks beautifully about the game, and he's an educated man. And I have to say that one of my abilities in life is to style out when I'm stumped. He will say words that, and I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know the meaning of them, but I get the gist of where he's going with it. But every time I hear him use one of these beautiful words, I take a note on my pad, and as soon as I'm off air, I'm Googling what it meant. and it's logged. And then all of a sudden, the lad that didn't even complete his GCSEs in English is able to add, university degree, brilliant broadcasters, vocabularies to my own vocabulary when I'm talking about cricket. So I've always been really sort of big on learning those things. I always say to Vic off air, I've got a couple from you, thanks Vic. I'm going to open up the dinosaur book, the old thesaurus, and again, I think I've got a passion for it, and I want to be as good as I can be. I don't want to be statty, don't want to be boring. I grew up in that TMS era when I used to listen to Gough and Caddick bowl on Ashes series on the radio. And I used to love the way that they used to be able to speak about the game, what was happening, and then talk about someone with a silly hat on in the crowd, or critiquing the cakes on day 2 that the ladies used to send into the commentary box. I really feel like that's a style I want to, and a history of broadcasting in cricket that I want to stay true to. And hopefully, in time, I'll get work outside of Somerset's live stream. I did get a number of quite a number of days of work with the BBC, with really high quality feedback, but post-COVID and things changing in broadcasting over the last few years, those opportunities have been few and far between, which is frustrating. But every time I'm on air, I get a lot of tweets through saying this guy needs to be on Sky, this guy needs to be on the BBC. So hopefully in time, like my cricket career, like everything else I've done, the hard work will pay off.
Absolutely. Well, a quick message to Vic, if you're listening, Vic, and I did have the pleasure of meeting you many years ago when I was running around Clarence Park in Weston-super-Mare, fetching balls that Viv Richards and Ian Botham were knocking out the ground. A quick message for you. Keep the big words coming, because everyone likes to see Peter Trego stumped every now and again. Pete, you mentioned the word change. Change is a big subject, and it's one I get more questions about than any other. How do I transition from one place to another? I think you probably would agree with me that cricket has seen a lot of change in recent years, and you don't have to be a cricket fan to appreciate what I'm going to say. And that is, I think of all the sports, it's probably changed more than any other, certainly the mainstream sports in recent years, introduction to T20, and that was designed to bring entertainment to a sport that I think had started to stagnate a little bit, if I can use that word. How do you, and you've reinvented yourself, cricketer, golfer, sports commentator. How do you deal with change? Does it come naturally to you? Do you find it easy? Do you find changing your direction of travel challenging? And if so, how do you deal with change? Because the other thing that a lot of people won't know about you is you're a really good husband and you're a really good dad. So you've managed to get a lot right, particularly the balance. I'm not sure what balance is exactly, because it's different things to different people. But how do you deal with change as a general topic?
Well, that's one of those compliments is a very subjective view. Me and Claire had a right Barney last night, but we're back on terms. Which
terrible timing, that question.
Yeah. No, we did have a right, but yeah, that's life, isn't it? That's life. You get over these things and you make it work. But I think there are pitfalls in life. I believe when change occurs. And whether it be a fear of the change, and sometimes it can catch you off guard, there's absolutely no doubt that I've been caught off guard a couple of times. I'll try and deal with them in some sort of chronological order. But one thing is that I believe in is, there's always opportunities as well when things are going well. And one thing that I think I've done well in my lifespan is, for probably 15 years, I was quite attractive to teams overseas. And I went away for a couple of seasons playing for Central Districts. I went to Zimbabwe, I went to Australia, all over the world. And that was great. But every time I didn't get picked up in an auction, I'd be like, right, okay, what's next? I could have sat on my hands and I could have done my gym work and all this kind of stuff, but things that you may or may not know. For 2 years, I worked as a project manager for a building contractor. Had a reasonably successful time doing that, but again, didn't get the buzz that you get from sport. And sport always has a knack of dragging you back. But I was caught off guard when I signed my first one-day contract. I was 37, 38 at Somerset. I felt like I played beautifully through the season. Somerset won the one-day cup at Lords. I thought, this is brilliant. Going to at least play for another couple of years for Somerset. And Somerset's management had a slight change of plan. And after having a really good season personally and winning a trophy, I was told that, you know, that was the end of the line for me as a Somerset player. And it really was, it caught me off guard. And I got to Christmas time and I was going to retire because, you know, I played for Somerset for 19 seasons. And yes, I played for other clubs. I played a season for Kent and one season for Middlesex. So at my first 21 years as a pro, 19 of those across 2 spells was for Somerset. So I've just won a Lord's final. I'm ready to wind down my career, and I was relatively at peace with it because other things were going on, and like I said, I'd had success in that building industry. And then I got to Christmas, I was like, and I was fit, man. I'll tell you what, I was as fit as I'd ever been, lean and strong, and you know, I was like, I'm not done it. I can't give this away. So I made a few phone calls, Nottinghamshire, Mick Newell, Peter Moores, and again, moons aligned a little bit for me. They'd lost a few senior players. They wanted to add a bit of seniority to their team, and I went up there, and I kind of like that saved me. And there was definitely, I was definitely on the way off an edge, whether it be professionally or emotionally. I really wasn't ready to stop playing. And I think if Nottinghamshire hadn't given me that lifeline, who knows where I'd be now in terms of like general happiness. But I went up there. I won another trophy with them. I took on more of a senior mentor role with the younger players, which really fulfilled me. And I ended up retiring at 40, a nice round figure. Not many players in sport get to that age, and it was like I'm satisfied now. But then COVID had struck, and everything I was doing outside of cricket was media and hospitality, which was 2 fields that were absolutely decimated. I had a really good relationship with a country club in Breen, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where we were running monthly sporting evenings that I was hosting, and you know, there was that was like the main part of my income at the time. Carpet ripped out from under me, and even though I probably was in a position, fortunately through other successes, it was like the wolves weren't at the door. And again, not many people know this. So I spent one summer and winter putting another craft that I was quite good at as a youngster, probably the only thing I actually learned at school, really, which was woodwork. I was always quite good with the tools and stuff. So I ended up just creating from nowhere this little sort of gardening business that, you know, fences and little bits of furniture and this, that, and the other. And I've gone from playing a T20 finals day to November, pissing down with rain, digging holes in the ground, putting up fences. So, I mean, that was a change that I wasn't ready for. And I was like, wow, that really took me aback, you know, because when you do jobs like that in the summertime in England, it's actually a really nice place to be. I'm not work shy. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I don't mind lifting big lumps of wood around and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. But I tell you what, there are 4 months a year where you just don't want to be outdoors in England, especially aging body. And that was a real wake up call. So again, I was able to reflect and call on all the things that I'd done when I didn't need to do them in the previous 20 years of being relatively high profile. And all of a sudden the door started opening again. Post COVID, you know, the media work started coming in, and yeah, so change is scary. But I think one of the pitfalls I think people fall into is I hear a lot of people saying stuff like, "Oh, I could have been more successful." and instead of really immersing themselves into the why weren't you successful. And I think that's one thing that I don't think I've ever fallen foul of. I've always, if I've failed at stuff, and I certainly have failed at stuff, it's not for lack of trying and lack of trying to find a way. But like I said, you can't be good and be successful at anything. And we've all got to find our niche. And luckily now, 4 years post retiring, things are quite smooth now. I'm coaching cricket. I'm talking about cricket. I'm just about to go to India to play in the Legends League. I mean, you very kindly introduced me as such. That certainly doesn't sit well with me, that title, but I'm still playing cricket. People still want to buy a ticket to turn out and watch us play, after we've retired from our, first class careers. So, I mean, yeah, the world is full of change, but I think you just got to attack it head on.
Well, do you know what? That wasn't a throwaway word when I used the word legend, and I would use it again for the simple reason that I'm a lifelong Manchester United fan, as many people know. I adore and have adored watching Somerset, and I guess if you ask any diehard Somerset fan who are the legends, oh yes, of course they're going to come up with Sir Ian Botham and Sir Vivian Richards and Marcus Trescothick, but they will also come up with James Hildreth. They'll come up with Peter Trego, and it's not because they compare people's ability. I think what they do is they compare people's commitment to the club. That to me has always been what a legend is. Legends in financial services, longevity, not necessarily the most natural talent or the most certificates on the wall. So I actually don't use that word lightly at all, Pete. I mean that sincerely. I think most fans that followed Somerset over the years would say Pete Trego is definitely in the Legends League. So you're well deserving of that title for sure. Now, the other thing I'm just going to pick up on before I ask you one final question is, to again, if somebody asked me to come up with one word to describe you, what would it be? There would be a few words, some we couldn't repeat, but the genuine ones, I think discipline would be the first word that comes to my mind. You mentioned that you were in the best shape of your life when you went to Nottinghamshire. I remember, being in the changing room with you thinking, blimey, I wish I could end up with arms like that. But again, you put in a lot more time than everybody else. It's as simple as that. Your level of dedication and commitment and discipline was such that you ended up achieving much better things than everyone else. To what extent would you say, because, there have been some mental challenges. I don't mean mental illness, but I mean some of those challenges that you suffer and have to deal with when you go from a career that gives you everything to, working for a builder's merchants, for example. To what extent does the discipline that you took from the gym to deal with the physical aspects of your career transfer to mental strength?
Good question. I mean, I think there's a number of elements to physical fitness. I mean, it's absolutely connected to your physical health and your mental health are absolutely linked. And I'm no scientist, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have to go far to find a lot of research papers that would suggest that is the case. So I mean, you think about in your world, let's maybe deviate a little bit away from sport, but when you see people, you're always smartly dressed. You've always kept yourself lean. You wear nice suits, and I just think there's I think there's an attractiveness to other people about, and I'm not talking about that level like sexual attraction or anything like that, but I think that draws people in. You often find people that are physically fit smile a lot more than people that aren't feeling their best. You look around on public transport or walking around in the summer, especially when it's hot, when people have got themselves into a physical state where they're not feeling their best, they're always looking uncomfortable and they're frowning and sweating in the heat and all that kind of stuff. So I think when you look after yourself, I think apart from the fact that you can just cope with the day-to-day hammering that your body is going to get as a sportsman, I think your just general well-being is right up there. I mean, I'm not going to be overly preachy on this, but I would urge anyone who's going through any sort of mental health distress or whatever, to maybe try and find more time to work on the physical aspect of themselves, and see how that happens. I know a lot of doctors are very pro that. Before you go into medication and all the other stuff that you can potentially go down, that's huge for me. I mean, what have you got? You know, we've both been successful, and that's awesome. But you know, in terms of finances, how much money you might have in the bank, what is your real like wealth? It's your health at the end of the day, isn't it? And yes, it's not been perfect all the time. Like for now, I'm half a stone heavier than I'd like to be, if I'm honest. I've had a winter where I've done a lot of traveling. I've had to stop at service stations, and you know, you grab a packet sandwich instead of eating something cooked for you. So I'm not in the best shape I've ever been in, but I'm very aware of it, and it's the first thing I try and correct. I don't go for any sort of like mystical, magical lifestyle changes in terms of how I think. It's just I invest a bit more time in my body, and I think, you know, when you walk into rooms, and you'll know this as a public speaker, when you've got a bright face, a big smile on your face, you draw people's attention straight away. And I think it's a huge thing, whether you're in sales, whether you're in business, whether you're a sports person, or just meeting a new friend. I think, yeah, having an engaging face, smiling a lot is a massive attractor for other people, and I reckon that's hugely linked to being fit and healthy.
Yeah. I think, you know, as everyone's picked up by now, Pete and I could go on talking all day. So I'm going to ask you one final question, Pete. I'm not going to ask you the well-trodden question, who's the best player, you know, that ever played cricket. I'm going to ask you two questions, a part A and a part B. Part A, who's the best batsman you ever played with and why? And who's the best bowler that you ever played with and why? You're obviously not allowed to say me. But who's the best batsman and bowler and why?
That I've played with.
Yeah.
I will say the best batsman I ever played with, and there are levels to this, because I think
I mean, not necessarily at Somerset, could be internationally, could be
yeah.
abroad, anyone that, you know, you're at the other end going, blimey, genius.
I mean, luckily, because of the longevity I've had in my career, I mean, you could go on to most test runs ever, and there's guys in the top 5 that I've played cricket with. You know, Jack Callis being one of those, who's an absolute, well, I think he is the greatest cricketer of all time. But I'm going to go with Marcus Trescothick, and this is purely based on, yes, he had great statistics, don't get me wrong, but you know what, as a Somerset lad, I saw the change of Trez from Somerset Trez, who used to bat 7 and bowl a little bit, to England opening batsman. I saw what he went through and did to get to the stage where he for England. And then when he came back 06, 07, post obviously winning the 2005 Ashes, I mean, this is really why he's the name that I'm going to give. I used to always like hang back slightly. We'd have a one-day game at Taunton, which, for anyone who knows cricket, limited overs cricket at Taunton, the Taunton's rammed. There's not a seat spare. There's people around. The buzz is awesome. Everyone, you know, having a day out of Somerset with a cider in your hand is a bucket list thing for most cricket fans in the world. And I mean that. We get people coming from all over saying, because of Viv and Botham and all that, this is, you know, one of our great days in cricket. And I can always remember like opening the batting with Trez, and I always used to hang back a little bit, because I had a funny little routine that I used to do ever since I can remember playing. I do this funny little stretching routine that I won't bore you with, but that meant I was always 4 or 5 yards behind Trez, walking across that rope to the crowd going crazy that me and Trez, well, Trez really, Trez was on his way out to the middle, and I used to sort of be like 4 or 5 yards behind him, and I'd look at the back of his shirt, number 1 Trescothick, and I'd be like, what the fuck am I doing here? This is mental. And like, I'd probably open the batting with a bloke 200 times by this stage, but I never ever didn't get that sort of imposter syndrome. And it was like, I felt like the luckiest bloke in the world to walk out to bat with him in a full house at Taunton. So Marcus Trescothick.
Yeah, that's a good choice, actually. I think those don't necessarily know Marcus's personal story, but it's certainly not one of linear success. He suffered with, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that went on in his personal life, and he overcame so many challenges. I think that's a really good choice. Who's the bowler, quickly?
The bowler, I would go with Matthias Muralidharan. I think
The fact that you could even say that suggests that that's probably a good choice as well. Yeah, I
mean, just ridiculous. I mean, playing with him, obviously, when you're playing in a team with someone like that, you also net against them. And I was lucky enough to play against quite a few times when he played for Hampshire, the other great spin bowler, you know, the 1 and 2 in the most wickets ever taken, which was Shane Warne. And I always felt like I could play Warney, and he got me out a couple of times, don't get me wrong, as he did most people, but it felt like I was at least, I had a chance and I was in the game. I used to face Murley in the nets, and the ball would spin about a yard one way, yard the other, and I had absolutely no idea. It was probably 10 miles an hour quicker than Warney as well. And I used to just feel like a clown against him. It was unbelievable. I mean, I think he took 800 test wickets in the end, and some ridiculous average. I mean, he for me, a little bit of a controversial thing because of his bowling action with the, you know, did he bend his arm and throw it and all that kind of stuff. But taking that aside, I just felt I thought it was unplayable.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was yeah, there's another legend right there for just based on his ability and everything he achieved in a very competitive environment. Time is against us. Love to carry on talking to you some more. Very much looking forward to that. Well, I've achieved the bucket list item on numerous occasions, been down to Taunton, but it would be very nice to do that with you at some point, Pete. And even if I get to sit in the back of the box and listen to you and Marksy doing your thing and writing down all the big words for you that you don't understand, and we can look them up together afterwards, that would be terrific. But thank you so much for being an amazing, as I expect you would be, guest today on the Success Stream. And long may you continue to do all the amazing things that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandro. And let me just take this opportunity to say, on behalf of a lot of people in Weston-super as well, Supermare as well, thank you very much for your continued support for Weston-super-Mare Cricket Club. I know your company sponsor the club, but it means an awful lot to have someone like yourself behind the club, because that club in particular has huge community engagement in my neck of the woods, and I live about an 8 iron away from the club. So thank you for supporting for probably best part of 20 years now. So I'm sure I can speak for everyone at Weston-super-Mare Cricket Club and say thank you very much.
You can take the boy out of Weston, but you can never take Weston out of the boy, right? So, but thank you, Pete. That's very kind of you. Once again, great to have you on the show today. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
Cheers, buddy.